Hey, what is up guys? So today we are going to look at what is occlusion culling and how we can prevent object from clipping. So let's say you had some kind of gun, okay, represented by this box for instance. As you can see, if I come near a building or anything, the object kind of clips through the window. So this is something that a lot of indie games have and want to fix but may not know how to. So yeah, let's take a look at how we can fix it. And before we get started, let me introduce you to the concept of layers and occlusion culling. So basically, if we select an object, okay, as you can see here on the top, we have a layer field, and by default you have about 8 different layers that you can use, and you click on add layer and you can add more or remove them if you want to. You can only have 32 layers. Okay, so what this essentially does is basically it allows you to differentiate objects in the game, and with this you could for instance use it with colliders. So if you had a collider on this game object and you wanted to on trigger take boxes, loot boxes for instance, you could have a layer called loot box and then void on collider on trigger enter or on trigger stay for instance. You could just check if the game object has the layer loot box before doing your logic. That's one possible use case for layers. And another use case is for the problem that we are trying to fix, which is to prevent clipping rather, or perhaps to render some objects in front of others, or perhaps to even just make them disappear. So this is the cube that we want to prevent from clipping. So let's just create a new layer on top and let's just call it gun. Click on cube, we assign this layer to cube, but right now it does actually nothing. And if I go into play mode, you'll see that it still clips. So basically nothing happens so far. As you can see, it still clips. So once we actually set the layer type to whichever one we want, we can select the main camera and come into culling mask, and right here I want to disable gun. So as you can see here, while the cube is still in the scene, as you can see the cube is still active, but the camera does not actually render it. Why? It's because we asked the camera not to render it using the culling mask. Same thing if we were to just select gun for instance, only the cube will actually appear. So using this technique, what we can do is we can have another camera that sits as a child object for this camera, okay, and we can call it gun camera. Okay, so this is the gun camera. So its job is to only render the gun, while the main camera has to render everything else except for the gun. Okay, so now we've got two cameras, so 1 and 2, but each one kind of renders different images and it's not really doing much. We actually don't see the gun. Now to fix this is actually quite simple. What we've got to do is let's just disable this one for now. Alright, so you can actually see the difference in the actual camera. So if we go into clear flags, here we can choose solid color, we can choose depth only, or we can choose don't clear. Skybox is the default one, okay, where you assign a skybox in the lighting pane. Solid color allows you to define a color that you can use as background. As you can see, I can just change the color to whichever one I want, and here alpha has no effect. And depth only renders what is actually being rendered, so it does not have any background in other words. And if I were to enable the camera back, and if I were to come here and change the depth to something higher than this one, now as you can see we are definitely seeing the gun object. So now if we were to mess around with this with solid color, as you can see this happens, it just overrides the view with the solid color. If we were to skybox, it shows the skybox, but because we've done depth only, this means that there is no background and only the objects with this tag is being rendered. Okay, so now we've got two different cameras. One of them renders everything except for the gun, while the other one only renders the gun. So now we can see the gun, and if we hit play now, this should allow us to hopefully prevent the gun object, or whichever object you want, from actually clipping through the actual building. As you can see now, it simply does not clip, even if our camera is clipping through, but the gun object does not clip, as you can see. And if you're wondering why it cuts here, that's because we have the clipping plane set to 0.03. So now if we increase this, as you can see, it stops the clipping completely. So now that this has been fixed, we can also demonstrate this effect by, let's say, having this ambulance kind of always being on the front of everything. So this will be rendered in the front. So again, let me just add another layer, call it vehicle, for instance. And you know what, let's just, instead of this ambulance, let me just assign it to this car. Okay, so this car will be vehicle, yes, to children's as well. Now what we can do is I'll duplicate this one and call it, I'll call it vehicle camera, and this one will have vehicle selected instead of gun. Okay, so let's deselect these two, and now if I play with the depth, you'd see that once it becomes lower than our main camera, we actually cannot see it. But if it comes above our main camera, then we can absolutely see it. Now if we were to place it as 0, and if we were to hit play, you'd see that the gun object still kind of renders on top of this this vehicle. Actually, let me just decrease so we can see it, and let me just also decrease the near plane. So now as you can see, the vehicle is rendered behind the actual gun, and if I were to further increase it to 2, as you can see now, what happens is that the police car has a higher priority. So this means that this will render on top of everything else. Okay, so as you can see, this can be used to make some cool effect. For instance, let's say in your game you had an arrow that once you actually touch someone with that arrow, or you shoot it at someone, and it will actually show them through all the walls and everything. So this is how you could actually achieve such a thing, by assigning a camera and assigning a separate layer to it, and then having the depth effect set to a higher value. So as you can see now, it just renders over everything else, which kinda is cool. So the same thing can be done for multiple different kind of effects. And yeah, so that's about it for today's video. It was kind of a short one, obviously, and I hope this kind of helps some of you. Perhaps you were facing the clipping issues with your guns or objects and you wanted a fix to it, or perhaps you wanted to make some kind of tracker that tracks the other objects or players even behind walls and stuff. And if that helped you, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe if not already, and yeah, also don't forget to tell me in the comment below what you think I should do next. And on this note, I'll see you guys next one. Bye.